Do that as soon as you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. So welcome to the session, Charting a Statewide Course, Trends and Analysis from OER Grantees. And go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Brittany Dudek, and I am the manager of OER and library at the Colorado Community College System.
And I'm Casey McCoy-Simmons. I'm a PhD student at the University of Denver and the Morgridge College of Education.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. My name is Spencer Ellis. I work at the Colorado Department of Higher Education, Director of Educational Innovation, and I get to work with open education resources and all of our statewide champions, including Brittany and Casey. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. So today we're going to receive an overview of some of the statewide data that the Colorado OER grant program has collected, which includes aggregate data from grantees, qualitative feedback from the OER grant, and the impact of OER on various types of campuses. We're also going to learn about the impact of a campus grant to new and existing OER initiatives and engage in an open review of the data collection and analysis process from the OER grant.
So this is me. I'm here to tell you a little bit more about what's going on in Colorado broadly. So fortunately, from my perspective at the Department of Higher Ed, I get an opportunity to see kind of this 30,000 foot view of all the amazing things that are happening throughout our state. One of those great things is that in 2017, we created some state legislation that helped us spark a funded statewide OER grant initiative. And the folks that you see on the very left of your screen are our OER Council. So this is our statewide steering committee on all things open education. They were huge advocates in helping this legislation go through and helped spark, like I mentioned before, a multi-million-dollar funded grant program. And since then, what we've kind of done is taken this holistic approach to open education and to OER in our state. And what I mean by that is open education in all dimensions. We wanted to do a little bit of everything. We wanted everybody to have an opportunity to play at whatever level they were excited to play at. Challenge by choice is what I like to say. And so in an attempt to do that, we've offered kind of this entire menu of opportunities for people to get involved, from our Open Education Ambassadors program, which is kind of a statewide training that we've coupled with the Open Education Network training, to our statewide conferences, to the grants, and grants range from $250 all the way up to $100,000. So whatever level of grant you may be interested in, there's an opportunity for you all to play. You can see on the screen some of our other exciting activities. We've had a great champion in our executive director, Angie Piccioni, as well as our governor. And you see signed in the middle of the screen is a proclamation for Open Education Week, which we were really excited to get. So we have the symbolic kind of support that we need and that foundational support through the policy to help really just prime innovation in our state and move folks forward in open education in any aspect they're interested in. So that's kind of what's going on broadly in Colorado. And over the course of the last 2 years, what we've seen is some really great impact. With the grant program specifically, we've reached over 41,000 students throughout the state with the OER content that has been either created or adapted by our grantees. So this reach is really important for our state. That includes 2-year, 4-year, community college, research institutions, urban, rural, all of our institutions throughout the state. And really that collaborative, collective impact approach has been the benefit and our biggest strength throughout the state. The statistic that you see in the middle, 4%, only 4% of the campuses said their administrators were not actively adopting OER. This is almost an exponential growth since when we first did our baseline survey of institutions back in 2017, and people were very skeptical. So we've done a good job, I think, of raising awareness and support at the institutional level. And you can see even 64% were somewhat active in pursuing OER on their campuses. And then here's the last metric I wanted to share with you all. 100% of faculty and staff said at least their administration had heard of OER, which is again, huge growth for us. And our goal, what we like to say, is 100% awareness of open education in the state. That's always an ambitious or stretch goal, but that is our goal nonetheless, and that helps us to continue to introduce people to open education throughout the state. Last few things to kind of touch on. So these are some of our other numbers. We've saved students in Colorado over $4 million at this point. Our governor recently named 6 OER champions through our Zero Textbook Cost Challenge. And we've had over 50 grantees at almost every institution. There's just one we need to get on board here in the state. There have been 330 courses addressed, including many of our general ed transferable pathways. And we have one OER council kind of championing all of this.
Well, thanks, Spencer. So now looking at what campuses across Colorado are doing specifically, including hosting events during Open Ed Week, like this flyer you see with the s'mores, which was at a four-year university led by their student government, discussing affordable textbook alternatives with students across campus, and also smaller passive programs like this little word bubble, asking if students didn't have to buy textbooks, what would they buy? And as you can see by some of the words that are standing out, it's things like diapers, bills, food, kind of repeating this throughout OER initiatives of how important cost savings is, because the money that they're saving are going towards basic needs. Institutions also continue to creatively demonstrate support and need for OER as awareness grows among faculty. One community college shared a curated video of student and faculty testimonials. You'll see one quote pulled from an instructor who shared that OER allowed her to take even more ownership in recreating her own classes. And it wouldn't be a 2020 presentation without also talking about online courses and the switch to teaching completely online this spring, which greatly impacted a lot of higher ed institutions. It's continuing to do so today. But we had many faculty and instructors share in our grant reporting that the additional financial impact of COVID has actually emphasized the need for continuing to promote OER across the state. And we go to the next slide. So diving a little bit deeper into our grant reporting process itself. As part of this process, grantees were asked to submit information regarding cost savings from replacing a traditional textbook or learning materials with OER, student enrollment numbers and pass rates in comparison to non-OER courses. As you see on the graphic, estimated cost savings far exceeded the total grant award each grantee received. Most notably, the little pool out there is from Pikes Peak Community College, who received a $40,000 grant and ended up saving students almost $1.5 million this past year. While this data is very informative, grantees also shared a variety of narratives that provided insight to the unique challenges and successes across the state. Faculty showed that the main challenge for faculty wanting to transition to OER and Z courses was, of course, available time and resources. Much of the pushback is due to faculty being cautious to adopt OER because of their perceived quality of the materials, as well as losing additional resources that traditional publisher textbooks provide, like assignments and test questions. Of course, there's many positive examples, including faculty who, it was shown once they were aware, actually gravitated towards expanding OER across multiple courses that weren't initially or weren't necessarily covered by the grant. And not only did OER cut costs for students, but as we discussed earlier, it also encouraged faculty to think creatively in redesigning their own courses and materials. And then finally, student feedback was very focused on the accessibility and use of OER materials, especially in this online space, and of course, the cost savings when discovering that their course was using OER.
So I have a couple of projects that we did not cover in our grant reporting that I wanted to share that we've been doing at Colorado Community College System. The first is a project where we're comparing the completer success rates for 2 complete academic years. So academic year 16 and 17, and then academic year 18 and 19. What we did was we looked at a very specific set of courses that met all of the qualifiers in terms of being developed by teams, et cetera. And those courses are Human Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2, Pathophysiology, COM 125, which is interpersonal communication, and then also Intro to Sociology. These course sets were selected because they were all going live in the same semester or the same term, and then taught for the same consecutive terms. So what you can see here is that the first two columns are the academic years 16 and 17, where the courses were taught with traditional publisher materials. And then the second two columns here are the courses when they were taught with zero textbook cost. So you can see here we had some pretty good results. There's a 9.4% increase in our pass rate. We decreased our failure rate by 35%. The decrease in withdrawals was around 7%. And then in general, our enrollment in these 5 courses increased 17.6%, which is significantly higher than the actual rate of enrollment increase that we experienced at CCC Online. So this is one of our projects that we're working on. And then the second project is one that's underway. If you want to go to the next slide, thank you. This is a project that we're focusing on specifically for equity and our zero textbook cost courses. We've partnered with the Center for Urban Education from USC to get, we call it Q data, or maybe a different term for that. But what we're doing is looking at those same sets of courses and then comparing them with the available student characteristics, like enrollment status, degree, certificate seeking status, Pell eligibility, race and ethnicity. And on a personal note, I have been very upset with the fact that we include the non-resident alien as a reporting category that's tied to race and ethnicity in IPEDS and CERDS. So if anyone wants to help me eliminate that or make some changes there, I would appreciate it. So we're also looking at gender, age, and then first-gen students. And this project is nearly, I would say the first phase is done. We've got the data. What we are looking at now is how we can actually continue to make specific changes to help these different student characteristics. If you're attending Open Ed Global next week, we're going to do a presentation on this, but I'm also happy to share the information as well.
Yeah, so this slide now is looking at a comparison between the 2017 and 2020 survey, statewide survey about OER awareness. I won't talk about this pie chart too much, but Spencer already touched on it about the state seeing 100% awareness across faculty and administrators at our public higher ed institutions. Another success includes the increase in institutional policies regarding OER. In 2017, no survey participants reported having institutional policies, but in 2020, this number increased to 8% of institutions, while several other participants shared their institutions included OER as other initiatives or were in the process of creating these policies. While this 8% number may seem low, the growth is promising and shows a connection between this increased awareness and OER adoption. Other areas of increasing support over the past 3 years also include administrative support in replacing general education texts with OER, creating Z degrees and Z courses, and having an open license research policy at their institutions. Grantee narratives also shared other OER benefits beyond cost savings, such as one community college that compared OER to their non-OER courses success rates by student demographics and found that OER materials were shown to slightly serve Black, Indigenous, and students of color more than their white peers in those specific courses.
Yeah, thank you, Casey, for sharing that. And we're really excited when we got that level of data from that particular institution, that community college that shared those kind of the comparison and a little bit more sophisticated kind of reporting system that Brittany has described, which we can't currently just require of our grantees, but that's kind of the intent. And so just to tell a little bit more about the processes and structures, with our grant, as I mentioned before, it's really, let's get involved at any level you're comfortable with. We wanted to encourage as much innovation as possible and never stifle the creativity. So if somebody was interested in adapting one course, they could get, you know, that appropriate amount of grant money. And I'm sorry, you're hearing my dog in the background right now. They could get the appropriate amount of resources to support them in flipping one course, perhaps. or we've seen institutions who have taken on this larger scope of building entire Z pathways or OER pathways over a few years. And so they're aiming to kind of have this institution-wide collaboration. And then for data collection, Casey was talking about this. She was, knee deep in this summer. We have big stacks of data that we have only begun to scratch the surface on. And so we're looking to obviously dive deeper into that. And also for, that comes mainly from our grantees, but we want to institutionalize the reporting around open education at our institution. So currently they're not required on their annual reports that are required to the state that then go to IPEDS. They're not required to report any sort of measure on open education. So our aim is to institutionalize that. And then we also want to talk a little bit about our next steps. And Brittany, feel free to jump in, but I'll just start by saying that data and reporting system is really on our minds. We want to enhance the ability of our grantees to be able to report. And so, with course marking and other policy requirements that we have in the state, I think we'll make our way there, but it's one of our goals and something that we're hoping to continue to advance in the state.
Yeah, so,
Brittany, maybe you can tell us more about sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, maybe you can tell us just about without the additional funding.
Sure. So this, we are in the middle of the final RFP for our third year of grant funding, and that is the last year of grant funding that we have. So one of the things that we are looking at is how can we continue this progress that we've made as a state and as individual institutions and systems without having more grant funding come through. One of the things that we're looking at is continuing our state OER council beyond the third year of our grant. We also have a very successful OER ambassador program where we've been, we've trained, but then also we're asking those ambassadors to come back and do, webinars or professional development opportunities for the state to share the knowledge and to share their experiences. So we'd like to continue that as well. And then also, through the last few years, we've been fortunate enough, and I say we, I mean the OER Council, Spencer, Casey, we've had the opportunity to really get to know a lot of experts from around the world and around the country. And to be honest, we want to take advantage of that and those relationships and to see kind of what further collaborations we can move forward with.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'd add too is, open education as a best practice or as a default strategy rather than as a shiny object. So when this was first introduced into the state, it was great OER, save students millions of dollars, and we love that. And we want to take it and continue to advance the conversation. And so it's really thinking about how we apply open education, lots of conversations that have been happening at this conference. How do we apply open education approaches to open pedagogy as strategies to advance our existing goals and longstanding challenges and systemic issues in higher ed specifically. So when you think about inequities, can open education be applied as a treatment to advance equity within the classroom? And I think it can be, and we've seen the evidence of that through the data, some of the things that Casey's mentioned, but we want to continue that conversation. So we don't necessarily need to have an OER initiative forever, but all of our goals, our strategic goals, our institutional goals, statewide goals, increasing student success, how does OER, how does open education play a role in advancing those goals? And then Brittany mentioned this too, meaningful local and global partnerships. It's something that we're always aiming to leverage because of this community specifically. Open education gives us an opportunity to collaborate in a very meaningful way. And so that's something that we're aiming to do on a strategic or, statewide, region-wide level. And so we're open to those conversations and we're trying to spark as many of those conversations as we can.
Yeah,
So now it's time for some Q&A, and we have had a few questions throughout the presentation, and so I've captured those, and we can start there, and then turn it back over to y'all and see if you have any additional questions. The first asked how the winners for the ZTC awards were chosen. Spencer, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we solicited nominations from across it was actually the governor's idea. The governor was like, he came to our statewide conference. He was like, I love open. You know that he had championed open and the first federal textbook OER grant opportunity when he was a congressperson. And so when he came to Colorado, finished his time in Congress, he became governor, and he was like, we're going all in on open. So he came to our first conference. I think there was a picture of him earlier in this. And he was like, I love this stuff. He's like, I want to encourage more of this, and I want to recognize how people are making contributions. And so we put out a call for people to nominate. Any institutions in the state could nominate. We got a good number of nominees, and we took those nominees back to an internal committee at the Department of Higher Ed. Department of Higher Ed made their recommendations to the governor and his staff, and then those winners were announced just recently, first week of November. And so we've been trying to, acknowledge, of course, all the nominees, because it was a very hard decision-making process, but also the winners for their outstanding work. And there were categories from individual awards to departmental awards to institutional awards. And yeah, just awesome to see the amazing work and recognizing the hard work that goes into open education.
Thank you. And then the next question we had was specific about the CDHE grant data. And they wanted to know how the data was reported up to the state from the campuses. Were they filling out a web form, standard reporting documents, and then who on each campus is assigned to collect and report this data, and what verification process does it go through? The grant data that we shared was specific only to the grant projects that we funded. And that was, so basically we're not at this point getting the self-reporting, this specific course or section is using a textbook or using OER. What Casey had shared and what Spencer had shared was very specific to the projects that the state funded. So we do know at least that those were not accidentally using OER and being misreported, which was mentioned. Spencer or Casey, do you want to jump in to answer the rest of that?
I'll say a little something, and then Casey, you feel free to, but this is kind of why I want to have more of this sophisticated approach to our data collection. If it can be institutionalized in the standard reporting throughout the state, it becomes then part of the culture and the things that the saying is something to the effect of the things that we pay attention to are the things that we measure, things that we are looking at. And so if we continue to look at that in kind of a more institutionalized way, rather than just the OER grantees or just the special cases that are making these impacts, that's where we aim to get.
Yeah, and I think kind of going off of that too, there was another question about, was the data submitted by participants checked by survey administrators, because this person, I can't remember who asked it, said that they need a double check sometimes because answers are all over the place. I would say one example is not necessarily grantees using traditional textbooks instead of OER, but maybe not necessarily OER, like they're using open access or other versions of open and free, but counting that as OER. And that is something that when I was going through the initial data this summer that we did address, we did account for, we did look at that. So that is something, as Spencer has said, like we want to formalize more and have a more strategic framework for evaluating this, but it is something that we are aware of and see as well.
So I know we're coming up here on the end of time, but there are a couple of other questions. So I think we've got to probably finish up here, but do we want to stick around and answer any further questions, or?
Yeah, and that's what, do we need to like stop recording and then we can continue?
I think we have to stop the recording. So I'll do that.
Okay.